Hi, it's Lucy, and today I'm doing a video where I go over the entirety of Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko. This is one of my videos where I give tons of spoilers. I'm basically relaying the plot of Raybearer. It's one of my favorite YA fantasies, which is why I want to reread it in preparation for the sequel, which is called Redemptor. This is a video you can watch if you haven't read Raybearer or you want to refresh yourself before reading Redemptor. I am currently pretty far into Raybearer. So the first 6 chapters, we get to see our main character, Tarisai, part of her childhood growing up at Bekina House, which is the place that her mother, the lady, has chosen to have her live and be raised. Tarisai is basically raised by tutors and various people that her mom hires. We're not sure at this point yet where they come from, and the lady rarely visits her. We can really see how Tarisai vies for the attention and love of her mother, and that's especially hard for her because of Tarisai's hallow or gift. In this world, some people are born with what are called hallows, which is basically just like they have a special ability. And Tarisai's hallow is when she touches something, she can sort of read that person or object. She can get their history or their memories. So because of that, the lady forbids anyone who's taking care of her from touching her. And obviously this makes Tarisai feel even more lonely because she can't get that physical touch from anyone. The only person who can touch her or is immune to her gift is her mother. But like I just said, her mother hardly ever visits her. This is especially hard for Tarisai because she doesn't even have like any kind of replacement love or affection from other people. We're told about this hallow because we're introduced to Melu, who was an Albato, which is a guardian spirit or fairy of a natural resource such as forest, river, savanna, or larger region. The book has a glossary, which is definitely very helpful for this video. So this Melu was a very powerful being, and the lady is able to trick him into becoming her Eru, which is basically an enslaved spirit. So it's kind of genie rules, I guess. I don't know. He has to grant her 3 wishes. One of her wishes ends up being Bekina House because that area is hidden from the outside world. Only the people the lady wants to know about it. And her second wish, she tried to kill the king of this land, Aritsar, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And Melu's like, no, I can't do that. I can't control life or death like that. Ultimately, her roundabout way of getting this wish is she forces Melu to procreate with her so that she can have a child that ends up being half human and half Eru. Tarisai is that child. She takes the last wish that Melu has to do. Since she's part of Melu, I guess, is the idea here. She has to go along with whatever wish that the lady has, which we'll get to. So now we know that Tarisai is half human and half literally an enslaved being, and you really see how she visualizes her mom in that context and why she yearns for the love of her mother so much. And also creating a being like this, a being that is half human, half Eru, Albato, is like considered an abomination. Tarisai is very young. Discovering all this, she's 7. And the last line of this chapter to really bring it all home is, "My mother was the devil and I, her puppet demon." I feel like that really encompasses what's going to be happening in their relationship. And in the next chapter, we see that because she learned about Bekina House and how it's supposed to keep her mother's like friends and people safe, she really takes this in and she's like, I can be safe in Bekina House because my mother loves me. And she starts putting herself in danger to try and like prove to herself basically that her mother loves her. So she would throw herself in the fire and be like, my mother saved me, when she would come out unharmed. And that's how she would like prove to herself that her mother loved her, because she had no actual proof. We also learn a lot more about Aritsar, and that's one of the things I really like about this book, the world building. I really like learning about Aritsar, which is a continent. It's implied that there are other continents around, which I'm really hoping we get to learn some about in the next book. We learn their like origin myth story, where basically there were 12 weak rivaling lands that were ravaged by Abiku, which are demons from the underworld. Then a warlord named Noba the Perfect Kunleo unleashed a power from the earth and united the lands into one massive continent, and he crowned himself emperor and enlisted 12 of the continent's rulers as his vassals. And they went to war against the Abiku, and they were very evenly matched, so evenly matched that it ended in a truce. And from there, Anoba was credited as Aritsar's savior, and all of the kings or emperors since then have all been from his family line. When Tarisai is 11, she is sent to the palace, and when her mom comes to bring the people who will ultimately be taking her to the palace for a test that she doesn't know about yet, we can see more of her mom's really narcissism, because she greets Tarisai as maid of me and sings her a little lullabies saying me, mine, she's me, and she is mine. And the two people the lady brings to take her to the palace are called Kathleen and Wu In. And Wu In is from Songland, and through him we learn a little bit more about Songland and the truce that was supposedly struck up hundreds of years ago. And basically the end of the truce was that the Abiku would leave everyone alone and stay in the underworld if every year 300 children were sent through a Ruku breach into the underworld for them to torture. I don't know exactly, but most of the children don't come back. And the children who are chosen for this, they're born with designs that kind of remind me of tattoos all over their body, which are supposed to be maps of the underworld so that they can find their way out. And these children are called Redemptors. The issue, however, is that for the last 500 years, every Redemptor has been born in Songland. No one knows why, and of course, because people are people have started to make up reasons why and why they maybe deserve to be only from Songland, and we get to see some prejudice come out. Some people say that somehow the Songlanders offended the storyteller, which is the godlike being in their creation story of the world. Some people say that Redemptor children were punishment for some historical sin of Songland, or maybe Songland was blessed by the storyteller, and their children were saints, chosen to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. The greater good, of course, was Artsar. And then the end of that chapter, the lady uses her final wish and shows her a portrait of a boy who will come to know is called Dio, and he is the crown prince of Artsar. She tells Tarisai, when you meet the boy in the portrait, when you love him the most, and when he anoints you as his own, I command you to kill him. Tarisai is freaked out. Tarisai is on her way to the palace. We learn a little bit about lodestones and a little bit more about the magic that exists in this world. Lodestones are basically teleporters, transporters. They are apparently expensive and also like bodily expensive. Every time Tarisai uses one, she like throws up, and they were trying to use it a lot. They had to stop because part of her body was left behind for a little bit. So it was nice to see more of the world. Also we see Tarisai's introduction to the palace. She's introduced to the Emperor and the current Council of 11 so that she may be tested in order to meet the Crown Prince, because little does she know that she's trying to join the Prince's Council of 11. Her mother kept her blind to everything so that she would be able to go to the council innocent, and because of this, for whatever reason that I still don't fully understand, they have to let her try and be part of the Prince's Council of 11 because of the laws of the land. But honestly, they do try to poison her. But Mbali, who's one of the council, and she seems to have like a soft spot for the children in general, does put a stop to that. But if I were part of this council, I would have told Mbali to shove it a little bit. We learn the lady has a history at the palace because Tarisai looks just like her. So they see her immediately and know that she's the lady's daughter. They immediately think that Tarisai is there to kill the crown prince, which low-key she is, but they don't know that, and she doesn't even really know that, which is evidenced by apparently Mbali's hollow is basically truth-telling. She can make people tell the truth, and so she uses it on Tarisai and asks Tarisai, did your mother send you here to kill the emperor? And she says no. And then she says, did your mother send you here to kill Ekundayo, Crown Prince of Aritsar? And she says, I've never heard of him, which is true because she didn't know who he was until she got there. So she couldn't have answered that. So really, this is all Mbali's fault. She should have asked a better question. Did your mother send you here to kill anybody? Which would have been true. And then she passes the most important test, which is with the prince. And they have a cute little conversation that 11-year-olds have. And then Mbali goes to try and take her away. And she says the right answer, basically, which is like, no, you can't take me away. Only the prince can send me away because I serve him. And through all this, Tarisai is actually very eager. Even though she's scared of all these adults, doesn't know what's going on at all, she hears that she will be able to have a lifetime of love and friendship, and she is immediately on board because she has been neglected her whole life and has not really felt the love from her mother or anybody. And so now she's like, oh, I can have all these friends. Like, of course I want this. And so we're also introduced to the three main friends that Tarisai will have throughout the course of the book. I already mentioned Dio, who is the crown prince. There's Kira, who is actually the first person or first child that she talks to when she gets to the palace. Kira has a healing hallow. Then there's Sanjeet. We love Sanjeet, who at first all the other children are scared of him. He is actually the first person to have ever connected with Dio's Ray. Oh, I didn't explain Rays or the Raybearer to you. Okay, let's try. The Raybearer is the emperor of Artsar, and they have a power known as the Ray, which connects them to the Council of 11, and through that connection, the emperor becomes immortal. The only thing that can kill them is old age or another member of the council, because they are kind of like inside of the Ray. Not only connects them in that way, but it also connects them heavily emotionally. So they often feel how each other's feeling. They're able to communicate within their minds. It sounds like mind reading, but it's a little less than that, because they are able to hide things from one another. So that is also what intrigued Tarisai about this, because you would be able to feel love in such a deep way. Back to Sanjeet, he's the first person that is able to connect with Dio's Ray. In order to connect with Dio, you must love him. Like, it's the number one requirement. You must love him and be loved by him. And so Sanjeet is able to do this. He's literally a big guy. He's 13 when we first meet him. Tarisai's like, why is there a man in the children's room? But because he's so large and people know his backstory, that he used to be a pit fighter, the other kids are scared of him. But he refused to be anointed onto Dio's council, even though he was able to connect with the Ray. We learned this is because his father is abusive, and his mother is still with his father. And so once you are on the council, you have to let go of your outside family, basically, let go of outside connections. He doesn't want to let go of that because he won't be able to see his mom again. He's also called the Princess Bear because of his large stature. They have a little conversation. They have an exchange where he says bears are dangerous even if they don't want to be. It's in their blood. And Tarisai says nobody has to hurt people if they don't want to. Nobody. They can't make us. And Sanjeet says, of course they can. If we're anointed, we serve at the pleasure of Prince Ekundayo. It's the council vow. We shine as moonlight, we reflect the morning star. And Tarisai frowns and says, why would anyone want to be moonlight? It's white and cold. I'd much rather be sunshine. That's important. So that is basically the encompassment of Tarisai's childhood. There's a time skip to when she's 15. There is a passage that I feel like really exemplifies this kind of cult-like behavior of the council, where Mbali joins them in their like rooms, and she says, good morning, candidates, and they reply, good morning, anointed honor. She says, why did you rise? Why did you not die in your sleep? And they say, because the storyteller has granted me to live another day. And she says, why did the storyteller allow you to live? And they say, so that I can serve the prince, the chosen Raybearer of Artsar, and aspire to be one of his anointed. And why must you serve the prince? Because I love him more than life itself. So that feels very cult-like behavior. Don't love that. We learn a little bit about palace life, how Tarisai has been doing. We learn that she continues to connect with Sanjeet, and she works with him to kind of help his memories, because he has a lot of memories from being a pit fighter, living with his abusive father. So they kind of have a ritual where Tarisai is able to make his memories disappear for a little bit of time. At one point, he's like, can I see your memory? At some point, she says, I'll run out of memories to show you. And he shrugs and says, then I guess we'll have to make more, Sunshine Girl. Okay, and we also get the creation story a little further in. We learn about Queen Earth and King Water, who are lovers, and they create many things like trees and rivers and creatures that creep. And they have a friend, which we learn is the storyteller, which is a pelican, which is older than earth and water and older than the sun. And they call the pelican Am the storyteller. High above earth and water floats Empress Sky, who's jealous of earth and water because Earth was Sky's sister, and now Sky is lonely and bitter. She challenges King Water to a duel, and so the war of Empress Sky and King Water rages for 7,000 years, and Earth feels neglected by both her husband and sister, and she takes on a new lover, the handsome warlord Fire. And the children of Earth and Fire multiply throughout the realm, fierce and strong, volcanoes, dragons, rubies, and mountains of coal. I don't think we see any dragons here. And once Water realizes that these children are not his, he abandons Earth, and all the lakes dry up, fields turn to desert, and Earth begins to die. So Am the storyteller comes to aid her, and it pierces its own breast to nourish Earth. When the pelican's blood falls, it creates humankind. But now Fire is jealous, so he curses humankind with 13 ways to die. And so the pelican steals rays from the sun, blessing the first emperor with wisdom and compassion, and says, you must choose 11 brothers and sisters, and for every brow you will anoint, you will gain immunity to one of the 13 deaths. And the pelican says, choose well, emperor, for to the world you will be as a god, but to your council you will be a mere mortal. It's noted that this myth was ancient, except for the Raybearer part, which had been added only 500 years ago. Be what people want them to be. Also, we detail the 13 ways to die, which are poison, contagion, gluttony, burning, drowning, suffocation, bleeding, beast mauling, disaster, organ death, witches' hexes, battery and old age. But also, it feels a little bit like bleeding, beast mauling, kind of the same thing. Drowning and suffocation, kind of also the same thing. When you drown, you die because you suffocated, I'm pretty sure. And witches' hexes, I feel like, wouldn't that encompass everything? What could a witch do that isn't one of those things? I don't know. You know, a little redundant here, but I'm just being picky. Also, we just get a little introduction to fun, misogyny, and sexism. At the end of this little lesson, Tarisai asks what happens when there's an empress. The priest who's teaching the lesson says, as I've said, the emperors don't marry. They have children within the council, basically, and it's mentioned that Dio does know who his biological mother is, but he is told to treat everyone on the council the same. But Tarisai is like, no, I meant, what about when the Raybearer is a girl? And the priest says, there are no female Raybearers, child. Am has always chosen a man. That does not mean, of course, the female council members have no value. After all, you might bear a Raybearer. The empire would be forever in your debt. And he winks at her, which is nasty. And also some foreshadowing. Keep that in mind. We also get introduced to some racism. There is a scenario while they're in school where they have to team up, and like I said, there are 12 what are known as realms, which are just like areas within the continent of Artsar, and each of those realms have their own culture and way of living. They follow different parts of the one religion that they all follow. They all believe in that creation myth I just told you, but there's some other aspects of it that they each align with. And so yes, they're all very unique, which we will talk about that. There is a definite theme of like colonialism within this story and racism, xenophobia. So this microcosm is during school, they have to team up, and while they are preparing to be on Dio's council, anyone who hasn't been chosen yet is called a candidate. So it says one of the Jabanti candidates complains and says that when Jabanti are paired with candidates from Derma, they lose timed logic puzzles, and basically implies that the Derma candidates are dumber. Dio doesn't really know what to say to this because obviously he doesn't agree, and so he says, I'm grieved by your complaint. I'm sure it's hard to feel that your strengths are compromised, but I doubt your problems are the other candidates. I'm sure Dermish people are just as smart as anyone. He has the teacher basically report how the Derma students are doing on tests and stuff, and the Derma students are lagging behind in test scores that involve logic, weapons, and science, but they're showing equal capabilities in god studies, griotcraft, and statecraft. This obviously adds fuel to the fire because it's proving to those Jabanti, how do I say this? To them, it's proving that the Jabanti students must be not as smart as them because they're not doing as well in those subjects. Whereas there's like a very well laid out, I feel like, showcasing of systemic oppression or like allegory for real world systemic oppression that I love so much. Tarisai, we're seeing her think in her head. She puts 2 and 2 together that the Swana and Jabanti candidates were likely to have names later in the Art alphabet, while Dermish names usually occurred earlier. And the way that the candidates are allowed to get out of bed or like go to the banquet hall to get breakfast is it's in order by name but backwards. So the candidates with later last names slept closer to the door, and the earlier names like the Dermish sleep further from the door. So by the time that they are allowed to go get food, there's not a lot of food left. So they're hungry by the time they get to those classes that they're not doing as well in because they were last to get to the dorm. They're also more rushed probably because they're the last to get to the banquet hall, and they're just picking over leftovers, and those classes occur right after their breakfast, which they didn't really have. So they're obviously running on no food and are tired, so they're not as able to do as well. By the time the afternoon rolls around, which is the classes where they show no difference, they are able to have lunch where I guess it's more evenly spread out when they get to go. So the solution probably would have been just 1, I don't understand why we can't all get food at the same time, but 2, we have to swap the order that we're getting food so that no one has an advantage. Tarisai realizes this, but she doesn't say anything, but I did want to show that like great math. I don't know. I just feel like Tarisai is such a smart character. There's like more things that happen that I feel like, oh my god, that was so smart. Like I feel like I rarely read a YA fantasy and I'm like, oh, the main character is so smart. Instead, we're shown like another example of how we as a society deal with systemic oppression. Dio's solution is to put a band-aid on it, and basically he wants the Derma students to get additional tutoring until they get better scores. This would be putting a band-aid on the problem, not a great band-aid, because they'll just be more tired because they're spending more time doing this. We also learn a little bit about Empress Ayataro. I don't know if this is foreshadowing or what. She was the one female empress one female Raybearer ever. And it's said that she's the reason women can join the Imperial Guard. She founded the Imperial College and abolished the inter-realm slave trade. Why was there slave trade? There's a wall that shows all the emperors, and Ayataro isn't in there because the priests say that she was a fluke and that she was only given the ray because her father died without male heirs. And she's an exception and doesn't negate the rule. We go a little bit more forward and we learn that Sanjit's mother passes away and his father was taken to prison. So the implication there is that it was domestic abuse, which obviously is awful. We see like a very touching scene between Tarisai and Sanjit. And we also learn a little bit about what happens when people die, as Tarisai gives a description of one of the only times that she has seen someone die, and it was here at the Children's Palace. We learn about shades that exist in this world. It seems that if you burn something of the person who died, there is a chance that they'll come back as a shade for just a little bit. It's said that they often don't come at all, especially if they died at peace. And so they try and bring Sanjit's mom's shade to them, but it didn't work. Yeah, we just see this very, very heartfelt scene. It is very sad. I don't feel like I can fully give you guys the emotion that goes through you reading about this. And because of this conversation, he decides that maybe his mom is at peace and maybe that his place is here, because the thing that was holding him back from accepting Daio's anointment was his mom. And now that she's gone, there's nothing holding him back. So then he joins the council. But in the middle of this little happy conversation, not really happy, but in the middle of this like heartfelt conversation, my camera's gonna die. Okay, so I left you all in the middle of a very intense scene. I apologize, my camera died. Not much to do about it. So he says to Tarisai, like, let's get anointed right now. Let's go wake up Daio and connect with his ray. And then they have an unscheduled trial. The person who bursts in to tell them that they're having an unscheduled trial is actually Kathleen, who was one of the people that brought Tarisai over to the palace so many years ago at this point. And fire is one of the things that Daio is still vulnerable to. As he anoints people on his council, he gets immunity from one of the 13 causes of mortal death, but since his council's not full, he doesn't have full immunity yet. And so it ends up that Tarisai tries to save him. Kathleen and Wu In are successfully able to get basically everyone else out of the castle except for Daio. Kathleen was pretending to be someone who was obviously supposed to be in the palace and said that, oh, Daio's already out. And so they just believed her. And so when Tarisai is like, where's Daio? They're like, oh, someone said he got out. But she's like, where is he? Because he's not here. She runs back in. She goes to save him. And it ends up that Tarisai carries him like through the fire basically to get out. And I guess she's still immune to fire. I thought that was a thing that only worked in Bekina House where she lived. But I guess maybe always. I don't really know how it works. Obviously, everything is emotional. And basically Daio's like, you must love me now. Will you accept my hand on councilhood? And Tarisai's so afraid of like the wish that she's been commanded to fulfill, and she doesn't know what to do. And then she comes up with a genius idea, and basically she uses her own hallow, her gift, to mess with her own memories, because like I said, she'd been doing it for the other children that were at the palace, including Sanjit, placing her own memories into his mind and taking away some of his memories. And so she goes into her own mind and basically covers up all her memories of the lady and her life before, basically, so she couldn't remember that she was supposed to fulfill the wish. And it works for a time. And that's basically the end of part 1. Part 2, I believe, starts off a year after the end of part 1, and they are at, and by they I mean Tarisai and the rest of Daio's council, they're at this temple because that is where the children that are forced to go into the underworld enter the breach. So they converted that area around it into a temple, and they go there every 100 years for a peace ritual, which was the preliminary, less grand version of the treaty renewal, which happens a year after this. The Arit Crown Prince and the continent's ambassadors all gather. While they're there, Wu In and Kathleen try and get Tarisai to remember, basically, by showing up and bringing her a Redemptor child who actually should have been basically sacrificed this past round of Redemptor children being sent through the breach. And she wasn't for whatever reason. They're telling her a bunch of stuff, basically, that Tarisai can't remember. She doesn't remember who they are. And she wants to hide the Redemptor child because she knows she's supposed to not be there. Also at this ceremony, they label all the council members, like what their roles are going to be once they're the only council, basically. Tarisai is assigned the High Judge, or High Lady Judge of Aratsar, because I guess we can't just say High Judge, because she's a lady. The ritual does not go as planned because a bhikkhu come out of the breach and are basically like, you owe us, because of the girl that Tarisai was trying to hide earlier, who Woo-in and Kathleen brought. She wasn't sacrificed. She wasn't sent to the underworld. So they were like, oh, you broke our treaty, so we're here now. And it starts like a battle. Also throughout all this, there's been a lot of allusions to the idea that the reason that Redemptors all come from Songland is a choice by the Emperor or something, or like a choice by humans. When the emissary of Songland accuses the Abiku of not being fair, if the Abiku cared anything for fairness, they would cease to rip babes from the arms of their mothers from the same poor realm year after year. And they say, when it comes to the birthplace of Redemptors, it is the blood, not us, who decides. There's a battle, multiple people die. Ye-un, who is the girl, the Redemptor girl, has a depressing end where she is like, it's because of me, isn't it? And Tarisai lies and says no. Ye-un says, you're right, none of this is my fault, it's yours. You were supposed to stop it. The Redemptors believed in you. You were supposed to change everything. And obviously Tarisai doesn't understand. Ye-un jumps into the breach, and it's really sad and depressing. And then we pick up 6 months later. All of Dio's council, including Tarisai, has moved to Yorua Keep, which is where the crown prince and his council live until he's ready to ascend to the throne, which usually is when his dad dies. There's some really good lines in here that I like and feel really applicable to life today in the real world, where they're talking about the Songland Redemptors. And Tarisai is like, maybe we could change a treaty, like have a new treaty so that we can like explicitly change the terms. She's talking to Sanjit and he says that our rulers would never allow it. And since Redemptors used to be born in every realm and nobody knows why it stopped, nobody's eager to like mess with that basically because all the other realms are safe. And Tarisai is like, why does everyone hate change so much? He says because things could get worse. And she says maybe, but do you know what I think? I think deep down we're afraid that things could get better. Afraid to find out that all the evil, all the suffering we ignore could have been prevented if only we had cared enough to try. That's what I like about this book. I feel like so much of it pertains to real life. We get some information that Dio has pretty unsubtly, in my opinion, been trying to keep Tarisai separated from Mbali for reasons we don't know yet. Mbali is visiting Yorua Keep along with the High Lord Judge Thaddeus, who is the person that Tarisai is going to be taking over for on the council someday. And he's like coming to tutor her, give her lessons in being a judge. And basically he had given her an assignment to like look through all the cases that we have and pick one that was going to be her first ruling. They get to make like a first ruling that is like never contested basically. She chose this case of a beggar named Bippo. Bippo accuses the council of being the reason that he is living in poverty as a beggar because when both of his parents died, he was sent to an orphanage and was unable to learn a trade or have a family. And so Tarisai's solution would basically be something similar to the foster care system we have now, or not exactly similar, but the idea is basically the government would give money to families who adopted children from orphanages and taught them a trade, and they would have the Imperial Guard warriors check on the families to make sure that the children aren't abused and are treated well. That's her plan, which is immediately shot down by High Lord Judge Thaddeus. I want to call him Thaddeus. And basically he's like, it'd be too expensive. How are we going to make sure that the families don't mistreat them? And she's like, I said the guards would check on them, but how often? We'd have to pay for all the guards to do that and then take them away from their actual posts and all this other stuff. And basically she's like, what about what's fair? He says, it took me many years to learn this, Tarisai, but justice is not about being fair. It is about keeping order. And so she's like, okay, what would you suggest? And basically he says like, not even a band-aid. He invents Orphan Day, where nobles take in orphans for a day and night. We won't have to pay anything because they'll be so excited to like show off their orphans basically and shower them in jewels. And then this way the kids get to pretend to have families for a day and the nobility will feel good about themselves, which really feels like it's paralleling real life so much. The nobles get to feel good and then the kids get to continue to be forgotten about, get like a taste of what a good life is like and then being sent back to an orphanage where I guess they'll grow up to be beggars. Even if they're not adopting the children, they could still send them out to learn a trade. I don't know, why wouldn't they do that? Do families pay like the tradesmen to like teach their kids? Is that how it works? But yeah, that would be my solution, I guess, of the impracticalness. Like maybe we only pay like tradesmen to do it. We also get another like hint, not really hint, but another showing of how the art empire is trying to become a monoculture. Like I said, all the realms have their own like separate independent cultures, and Thaddeus brings up a new edict which basically bans the use of like realm specific artifacts and says that they should all be given up to the emperor and they will be replaced with like new art empire wide artifacts, basically. You know, just like fully erasing culture. It also says that families are encouraged to forego realm names. Every culture has like common names and such, so they're like, oh, choose names that reflect virtues of a united Artsar. And while this request is not mandatory, children with empire names will be rewarded with additional food for their families, as well as clothing cut from empire cloth. The new favored style of the capital. I'm feeling Hunger Games vibes in this little edict. Also wanted to mention one of the things that I remember like wanting more of from this book the first time I read it was we don't really get to know the other council members other than Kira, Senji, and Dio. There's this one chapter where they're all getting their hair braided, which I really liked, where we get to see the other female council members, which I thought was nice and a nice bonding moment. And like there's a lot of like parallels to real life as they have their braiding party, bond while they're getting their hair done. Fast forward a little bit, the reason they're getting their hair braided is for this special ceremony that they're having called the New Ina Eve, and they're having it at the local village that's near Yorua Keep. And also we get to learn a little bit more about the religions in Artsar. It says that all 4 religious sects in Artsar worship the storyteller and believed in the basic catechism of creation, but the people of the Clay, one sect, revered Queen Earth, and most of them live in rural realms like Swana, where Tarisai is from, Mu, and Moriao. And they refuse to eat meat and oppose the clearing of jungles and development of cities. There's people of the Well, which criticized Earth for her fabled infidelity to water. They mostly lived in the coastal realms, which is like Sparti, Nantes, and Jabanti, the most devoted. And there's people of the Ember, which was the most popular sect in Aluan, where the palace is, and Derma credited Warlord Fire with Earth's wealth and showed their gratitude by mining jewels and precious metals and forging tools and weaponry. And finally, the fastidious realms like Berislav and Blessed Valley, which is where Kira's from, appealed to the people of the Wing who worshipped only the Pelican storyteller. They covered their heads, spurned other gods as distractions, and embraced a life of simplicity, piety, and sacrifice. And at this holiday, basically, there's like a ceremony where you get like a trinket in the bottom of your bowl. A basically fortune teller tells you what that trinket means. Sanjit got a trinket where the elder said, your hands were made for death, and there's no other interpretation, which obviously Sanjit feels a lot of guilt for his past actions when he was a fighter as a child, and then he also just like feels like he can't like escape what his body looks like, what his hollow is. Like he always feels kind of like that, like my hands were made for death, and so he's like trying to fight against that. And so obviously this was devastating to him. So part of the thing is that you can trade tokens, or if it's an unlucky token, someone could act as their champion and cross this pit that they dig for this express purpose. And it's like, seems like pretty dangerous. There's fire in it. So it's mostly just a joke. People don't do it usually, but Tarisai decides to do it for him. She crosses the pit successfully. It's a whole thing. And then this like spurs Senjit and Tarisai to have their own like moment. And they have like a nice little conversation. And he says, I choose the girl who walks through fire. I choose sunshine, which if you remember, he calls her Sunshine Girl all the time. Then they kiss, and it's their first kiss. It's so cute. And also, this I think will matter later, Tarisai caught Mbali and Thaddeus in a compromising position. It's a rule that council members are not supposed to date other council members. Basically, the women are only supposed to like have sex with the emperor so that he can have an heir. And then there's not supposed to be any dalliances, I guess, but it's understood that everyone does it anyway, except Mbali and Thaddeus speak to her privately at this party basically and are like, please use discretion. Like, it's understandable if you told your council, but do not let it get back to the emperor, which Tarisai thought was very strange. And the end of this party is the worst ending ever. The lady has finally caught up with Tarisai. She tricks her into swallowing water from Melu's pool, which causes Tarisai to remember all the things she made herself forget. We get like a nice juicy example of the lady's narcissism. I really think this book is such a good case study maybe of like having a narcissistic and abusive parent. She says, I was so hurt when you chose to forget me, your own mother, but I forgave you once I realized the truth. You rebelled because you are me. Strong-minded, independent, I cannot fault you for mirroring my strength. Can you make anything about you or what? And so Tarisai goes back to the keep, gets Dio alone. Basically, Dio kind of comes out as asexual because he thinks that Tarisai has like brought him to a separate space to like have sex. This is the time when Tarisai tries to fulfill this wish, and basically she stabs Dio in the stomach, which I don't know if there's implications of like coming out and then immediately having attempted murder on you. I don't know if that might be a bad look, but it's very heart-wrenching, I promise. So Sanjit had followed her and Dio to where they were because Tarisai was supposed to wake up Sanjit and they were supposed to go off alone. So Sanjit is like, what the hell are you doing? What just happened? Tarisai is able to wake up Kira, who's a healer, and get Kira to come. Tarisai is able to explain to them eventually. First, she's like saying a bunch of things that don't really make sense to them, and she's like, okay, let me show you. And Kira still trusts her, and Sanjit is like, does not trust her at all, thinks she's a monster, but she's able to show them what happened. Sanjit says, if we touch you, you could steal our memories. And she says, I never stole your memories, I only took your bad dreams. He says, you should have let me keep them, you are the only nightmare. So after like brief discussion, I guess, Tarisai's like, I have to go back to Swana and find Melu to see if he can figure out how to break this curse so that we can both be freed. And then, because they all love each other so much, Kira's like, okay, I'll go with you. And Tarisai's like, no, you can't, you have to stay and heal Dio. Sanjit is like, I guess I'll go, even though he's still like super duper mad. Basically, the game plan is her and Sanjit will leave. Dio and Kira will keep what happened from the rest of the council, basically, as Dio's healing, and hopefully they come back with a solution to all this. And that is the end of part 2. So we're back for part 3, and we now know Dio's safe. Nobody knows what Tarisai did except for Kira and Sanjit and Dio. So Kira's working on healing him. Nobody is really concerned about him because Raybearers can't die, and nobody knows what Tarisai did. Her and Sanjit are heading to Swana. They are bringing guards with them because they are still council members, and like I said, Tarisai is not disgraced or anything because nobody knows what she's done. Because the nearest village where originally Sanjit wanted to spend the night to get to the next lodestone is where Tarisai saw the lady, Tarisai does not want to go through that village, so instead they go through something called the bush, or bushlands, which are magical areas which are explained from Inoba the Perfect, who had created bushlands by accident, because when he united all the lands into one continent, New Earth had grown, but the land also plowed over ancient ocean passages to the underworld, which trapped malevolent spirits between this world and the next. So people who go through there, they experience sometimes terrible things. It makes you see things, makes you feel things, you think things are real. So they end up going through the bushlands with their guards. Sanjit is able to forgive Tarisai through their journey through the bushlands, and then they go back in to get their guards and everything. Unfortunately, because of the things that they see, one of the guards ended up killing another of the guards because the bush made him think that she was an animal. Also at the end of this little passage, because Tarisai and Sanjit went back for the guard, the Imperial Guard says, you are Artsar's future, your lives must be preserved, but you came back. I will never forget what you did, and neither will any of my comrades. The Imperial Guard shall always be loyal to Tarisai of Swana and Sanjit of Derma. For the first time in many moons, I smile for the future of Artsar. And this is another kind of foreshadowing kind of hint, because Tarisai is wondering why she would have doubts about Artsar's future, because the Imperial Guard are supposed to be the most loyal to Artsar. And on their way to use the lodestone, they kind of see the beginning of Thaddeus's Unity Edict taking effect. People are complaining, protesting, having their artifacts taken away. Sanjit and Tarisai are dressed in Imperial Guard uniforms to better blend in so people won't realize it's them. When they finally reach Swana, they end up approaching Caravan, who offers up that they don't have any griot drums, like any artifacts for the Imperial Guard to take away. And this gets Tarisai a little bit, and then she immediately offers to buy out this caravan's whole stock. The merchant is called Togoso, and his wife and fellow merchant is there. Her name is Kia, and she's also pregnant. They talk about what she wants to name the boy, and she says that she wants to name him Bopello, after his grandfather, but Togoso thinks Overcomer or Peacemaker would be best because those are Arit names. And she says that in the end, her husband will probably have his way because they need the reward money that they get for using Arit names for their daughter's schooling. They have 4 other daughters. The couple takes Tarisai and Sanjit to Old Mongwi because they ask about Melu's pool, and this woman helps travelers, which is the duty of her holy order, the priests of the clay. Togoso says if she cannot find Melu, she can at least settle your stomachs. They get to Old Mongwe Shrine. She is a funny old lady. They ask, are you Old Mongwe? And she says, no, I'm Mongwe, the newborn babe. Old Mongwe is in the other sprite-covered earth shrine in the middle of the wilderness. And we love a kind of salty older person to guide our main characters. That's a trope I really like. Like she said, this shrine is covered in like sprites who are like kind of attached to the spirit world, I think. They're called Tutsu, and the Tutsu can take them to Melu, but they're very protective. So old Mengwe's like, I don't know if they'll take you. They're like, we'll pay whatever. And she's like, I can't tell them to take you. Like, I just let them live here. And sometimes they show me where the honeycomb is. So you have to offer something to them. Tarisai makes an attempt to plead with them. They kind of ignore her. She doesn't know what to do. And she takes a bath and she realizes that she needs to find her confidence. She uses her hallow to understand them. I reached with my hallow into the ground, consuming the births, deaths, and dances of a million sprites, drinking the tiny stories of power, seeping into every blade and flower, every tree and anthill in the vast savannah. She says, I am Tarisai of Swana, and I've seen your stories now. They belong to me as mine belong to you. You don't have to help me change the world, but you mark my words, when I get going, this world will change. And you can be a part of that, or you can stand back and watch. And this kind of gets them on their side. They choose her. It's also nice to see Tarisai show her confidence. That's really what the story's about. It's about her growing her confidence from when she was a little girl, being mistreated by her mother, feeling like basically that she didn't matter, which causes someone to shrink up. And this is her taking up space. They find Melo's pool. He explains the story of the lady, which I will attempt to summarize. Even though an emperor can and does sire many children, all the ones except for the Raybearer are born without fanfare, without much acknowledgement. So the sons who are born without rays and the daughters are sent away and are adopted by nobles who raise them away from court. However, when Olugbade's father had a daughter, Prince Olugbade took a liking to her, basically kept her as a pet, which sounds odd. She grew up worshipping her older brother Olugbade, and they grew up together in the palace, even though that was not the norm. However, she started to grow up and get attention of her own, which caused Olugbade to get jealous. The lady began to interrupt Olugbade's lectures, basically talking circles around him, stumping him in riddles, beating him at chess, and just showing that she was intelligent on her own merit. Lots of sexism there. This caused Olugbade to withdraw, and this made the lady double down because she was like, I love my older brother, why wouldn't he like me? Like, maybe I just need to be better. And because he was so jealous, he was not good to be around either. He required constant proof of people's loyalty, recoiling at the slightest hint of criticism. All but the most patient children found him exhausting. So this caused people to draw away from him and towards the lady. She's thinking if only he would look at her, if only he would see her, the real lady, a partner, not a pet. She could make up for all his weaknesses. They would be a team, a family, and everything would go back to the way it was before. The lady plotted. A spark had nestled in her breast from the moment she was born, an ember she had never dared coax into flame. According to the priest, her spark should not exist. But now she thought perhaps that spark was what she needed. She basically reveals that she has anointed some of the other children and reveals that she does have the ray, which is supposed to be impossible, but she has a connection with some of the other children so that she can hear what they're thinking and they can hear what she's thinking. She's saying we can rule Artsar together, and he becomes irate and he banishes her and the people she has anointed, her council. And there's some foreshadowing of Mbali because young Mbali was there. You know, she's on the current council, so that means she had to be there as a child. And it seems like she was actually close to the lady because the lady, during this like flashback that Meili is showing, says, come with me, Mbali, I can anoint you too. You're better than this place, leave him. But Mbali says, I can do better work here with the prince. Still, she mouths at the lady, I believe you, you have the ray too. Which is fascinating when you remember the beginning of the story. I know I was complaining like Mbali asked the wrong question, but maybe she kind of knew what she was doing. And this is how we reveal that not only is the lady a Raybearer, her child Tarisai is also a Raybearer. Melu tells her the reason she was immune to fire is not because of the lady's love, but because every Raybearer is born immune to one vice, and hers was fire. And that is when Sanjeet says he knew it. Tarisai does not want to believe it, because this is her whole worldview blowing up, and also that she is a mythical person that's not supposed to exist 2 times over. Not only is she a child of an Alakbakto, but now she is a Raybearer. So that is a lot. She's kind of having a breakdown over it. So they resolve to try and find the 2 lost masks. They don't know where they are. There are supposed to be 4 Raybearers in the world because there's a mask for each the emperor and the son, and then 1 for an empress and a daughter. But those 2 masks are gone. And then Melu says that Tarisai needs to find her purpose. She states, my purpose is Dio, and he says, no one was made for another person, Tarisai. Melu also reveals that the lady is also imprisoned at the main palace in Oluwan. The emperor has never stopped looking for her, so there were spies waiting for her. And the lady only has 10 council members, not 11, so she still has something she's not immune to, but they don't know what. Meilu won't tell them what because he actually wants her to die because, you know, she did trap him there at this pool and also forced both him and Tarisai under this horrible curse. He says this is the easiest way for this to end. Tarisai won't be compelled to kill Ekundayo. They will both be free since the lady will be dead and she will no longer have control over them. But obviously Tarisai does not want her mother to die. They go back to Bikina House to kind of regroup, figure out what to do next, where they find Kura and Wu-In, which is a surprise because Kura is not supposed to be there. She is there because she needed to get Tarisai and Senjit because the whole Children's Council has been summoned. So she happened to meet Wu-In because she found him following her. They kind of had a moment. There's some implied romance here, and he knew where Bikina House was, so he took her there. Kira hands her her summons, which states that she is summoned to have her first ruling ceremony. And Senjit is being summoned to help run drills because they are planning to enact the Unity Edict with force now. Also, Kathleen comes back. Wu-In explains his Hallow, which he describes as not quite a hallow because it can be taught, though some forces respond only to certain bloodlines. It's called Sawanhara, the language of nature. The silent language of wind and air may only be spoken by the royal family, which he is. And while they're searching Bikina House for a way to figure out how to find Ayataro's mask, Tarisai is shown the lady's journals, which show a much broader story of the lady's care for her. Basically, Wu-In and Kathleen are like the lady took notes on everything you ever did. Even though she said she was leaving the house, she was always right there, basically watching and just making her think she's alone. She says, was hiding my presence cruel? But suppose I had commanded her by accident. Threw away my last wish, our only chance at victory. No, regret is folly. The guilt will pass. It always does. And then there's just pages and pages of basically her whole life, which is good, but still shows the harm the lady has caused. She harmed herself because she loved Tarisai in her own way, and she harmed Tarisai by making her grow up feeling unloved. They also read the journals to try and figure out how the lady planned to not have all the Redemptors be born in Songland, and what they reveal is that she didn't plan that. In the journal, it seems like she does know how, but she is not planning to do anything about it. So basically, it's revealed that she lied to Wu-In. The whole reason she anointed Wu-In is so that she could have Songland's army's backing when she tries to take over Artsar. Fast forward a little, they get to the main palace where Tarisai has a meeting with Ologbade. It is revealed that her first ruling is to condemn the lady to death. Obviously, she doesn't want to do that. And Mbali, kind of jumps in and is like, oh, death is not the punishment for trespassing, Emperor Sir. Basically, he's like, this isn't for trespassing. This is for leading a coup all those years ago, which was, I guess, a twisting around of the story that Meilu told. And that, my friends, is the end of part 3. Welcome to the final part, part 4. So we pick up with Tarisai visiting her mother in prison, in jail. She's being kept in the worst part of An Ileoba, which is where the palace is. It's an open-air prison located on a roof overlooking the courtyard. And they call it Heaven as kind of a funny nickname because it's on a roof. The meeting does not go as Tarisai expected it to go. The lady ends up mad at her once Tarisai confronts her with the knowledge that she found from the lady's journals, that the lady was at Bikina House the whole time and hiding away from Tarisai, even though she missed her so terribly. The lady says, you are perfectly happy. I provided every comfort you needed, and you repaid me with hatred. You chose to forget your own mother. And they have an argument where Tari says, you told me to kill someone, and I was a child. I didn't know what I was doing. And the lady's like, it was for everybody's good. It was for the greater good. Tarisai tells the lady that she learned everything that happened from Meilu. The lady is also mad about that because she says that Meilu put Tarisai in danger and that Dio would do something to her if he found out that she had a right to the throne. And Tarisai says that she doesn't want the throne. The lady doesn't trust him and basically confronts her with what really happened to her when she was banished by Ologbade. And she says, did Meilu show you what happens to a palace girl who's thrown onto the streets? Did Meilu let you see the bruises on my body, the scars that never faded? Did he show you the starvation and the cold? Her mother does another abusive thing where she guilt trips Tarisai for feeling anything for Dio, even friendliness, because his father did something horrible to her. So Tarisai ends up apologizing, and then they kind of have another fight because The lady calls her maid of me again, and she says, "Say my name, mother. You've never done it before. I just want to hear you say it." She wants her mother to acknowledge her as her own person, and she won't do it. The visit ends with Tarisai telling the lady that she will continue to visit her while she's imprisoned and not to worry, basically. The lady says, "You have never worried me, daughter. You have only disappointed." She talks to Sanjeet after this, and she tells him about her conversation with the lady and how the lady, even in that short conversation, makes her feel ungrateful for forgetting her. And Sanjeet reminds her, like, she ordered you to kill a child as a child. She's clearly manipulating you. He says, "She made you ashamed of wanting your own name. How can you think that's what love is?" She says, "You only get one mother, Jeet. It's like your father. He hurt you, but can you imagine, truly imagine, having any other kind?" They have a cute moment, and he says, "I guess the only gift father gave me was a way to understand you." And they cute, and he calls her Sunshine Girl again. So jumping forward a little bit, Tarisai is in the library, like furiously looking through texts and things to see any information she can find about the Lost Queen, about Ayataro's mask. Kira comes in. She hasn't seen Kira since she got back because she is living in a tower separate from the rest of the council, kind of with Sanjeet, so that she doesn't get council sickness. Also, so she's away from Dio because she hasn't technically resolved the urge to kill him. Her and Kira have a conversation where Kira tells her that her part of the Unity Edict is for her to like go over old texts and edit away verses that could threaten Empire unity. She says, "Every time I think about changing the old songs, my blood wants to boil." So another aspect of this Unity Edict and the things they're doing to erase culture and turn themselves into a monoculture. Tarisai is able to find a little bit more about Ayataro. There's a nice scene documented where she's finally called back to the palace. She arrives, and the nobility are deciding what to call her because she didn't have a name before even. They are coming up with a bunch of names, and she finally says, "I will be called Ayataro, for mine will be an era of peace at any price." So Tarisai spends her days researching. Everyone's like doing their part of the Unity Edict. She's still staying far away from the rest of the council so she doesn't accidentally run into Dio and try to kill him. Fast forward a little bit, Dio finally comes to try and talk to her. Luckily, there is a door in between them. She doesn't open it all the way, and it's still like locked. And Dio is like, "You haven't been reading my messages." And they have a discussion basically where Dio reveals that the whole time he knew that Tarisai was going to try to kill him. As children, they all sleep near each other, and she fell asleep in his pallet, and she ended up touching his face. Because of her halo, she ended up showing him in his mind the day that the lady showed her Dio's picture and told Tarisai to kill him. So he knew the whole time. He was like, "I tried to help. I thought I could keep you from remembering so the lady couldn't control you." And Tarisai's like, "Why would you ever put yourself in this danger?" And that's why earlier in the book, I mentioned that it seemed like Dio was keeping her from being tutored by Mbali because he was like, maybe being reminded of Swana too much will bring back her memory, basically. His reasoning for keeping her on the council, keeping her around, was he was like, "You could have killed me many times, but you saved me instead. I knew you weren't the lady's pawn. And more importantly, I knew Artsar needed you." When she left after she stabbed him, he said that it felt like being stabbed again. Losing you wasn't like losing a friend, it was like being erased, like losing half of myself. Kira told him about needing the Empress and Princess mask, so Ayataro's mask. He says that he always knew that she had the ray. He could feel it when they were children. He says, "I'll admit it scared me. I had trained my whole life to be emperor, but deep down I knew you could do it better." Tarisai tries to reassure him and says he's so kind and sees the best in everyone. "You're exactly what this empire needs, Dio. Artsar would be heartless without you, but it would be weak without you," Dio retorted. She once again reiterates that her belly song, her purpose, was to protect Dio. We get to the next day, which is the day that Tarisai is supposed to give her first judgment, and she has manufactured something. She is supposed to hear the case of her mother, the lady, and she's like, "No, I'm actually gonna hear another case today." And she has Kia, the merchant that picked her up when she was in Swana to find Melu. She has had the baby. Her son is almost 3 months old. And she says that she will bring a case. And she accuses his anointed honor, High Lord Judge Thaddeus of Mu. She charges him with causing discord between a husband and wife. "I want to give our son a Swana name, Bopello. It has been in my family for generations, and I dishonor my ancestors by failing to pass their legacy. But my husband disagrees. He fears that unless our newborn son has an empire name, he will never become a successful merchant. Anointed honor Thaddeus' unity edict has caused all of this. If he had not requested that arts give up realm names, I would not be fighting with my husband, and my son would have a name besides Baby. Everyone in the crowd starts laughing because it was ludicrous for a commoner to charge a high judge with causing marital disputes, but Tarisai knows that it was legal. Tarisai accepts the case and rules in favor of Kia and revokes the Unity Edict, which is a big deal, obviously, because they had just spent multiple months trying to enforce it. The first ruling of a new judge is supposed to be binding forever, so it can't be unrevoked. Olugbate wants to, I think, arrest her right now, and Thaddeus convinces him not to because they're in front of a huge crowd of the people, and it would be a bad look. They escape. Kia leaves. Tarisai has arranged something for her family to keep them safe and so that they can lay low, because this would obviously cause discord. There's like a funny sentence at the end that shows the book's humor where Tarisai thanks her again and she says, "Thank you. I think Tobogo will not question what I name our babies again." And she kind of holds up her son's hand and says, "Wave goodbye, Papello. Goodbye to the High Lady Judge." And it's just funny. She returns to the Children's Palace after this, and she has a sudden realization, and she takes Ayataro's drum, which she's had for a while. She ends up cutting it open, and she reveals several crumpled pieces of journal paper and also 2 masks. One for an empress and one for a crown princess. Her and Sanjeet have a great moment that now she's finally found these masks. Kira jumps in on their moment and says the emperor has sentenced the lady to death, has taken her back to heaven to execute her. Tarisai runs just in time, basically. The emperor is like, "I see now, I shouldn't have made her child oversee her mother's killing," which, like, duh, obviously. He is still determined to put her to death. They don't know what will kill the lady. It's like a death by firing squad that she's sentenced to, and archers all have their bows and arrows set, and he releases them. But she is immune to such things. I thought she would get hit and it just wouldn't kill her, but they actually stop in the middle of the air and like flop. And she says, "Am I still a fake brother?" Like, clearly something's going on if that happened. Olugbade is still firmly putting his head in the sand and saying, "It's an illusion, enchantment, sorcery, we'll try another way." Thaddeus says, "We can't do that. Now everybody's seen that something has happened. They'll have a lot of questions if we just kill her." And the emperor is like, "I will not be stopped." And he wants to try and poison her with a knife. And she says, "Okay, I deserve at least my last rites. Mbali should read me the ending." The lady and Mbali start saying it together, but then the lady does a double cross. The lady grabs Mbali and has them both leaning over the edge of the tower. Someone is going over. It's me or her. Olugbade puts down his knife. Tarisai realizes that she accidentally betrayed the council because the lady is looking at Thaddeus, who, remember, is having an affair, or was having an affair, with Mbali, and therefore is very effective. And Tarisai had told the lady about this during one of her visits to the lady to make her smile, because, you know, that's what happens when you have an abusive mommy. You do things to make them smile when you feel bad. Thaddeus is so worried and shocked and kind of knows what he has to do. He has a flash of all his memories with Mbali that Tarisai sees due to her gift. It's such a strong emotion in him that she doesn't even have to touch him to see it. And he knows what the lady wants him to do. And he pushes the emperor over the edge. And the lady fumbled at the same time, ended up dropping Mbali anyway. They hear a single crack, and Wooin has rescued Mbali, like caught her on her way down, and he grabs a knife from the ground and swipes at the lady for lying to him and his people. But unfortunately, that was a knife that Olugbade has poisoned, and so he kills her. He kills the lady by accident. Obviously, Tarisai is very upset. Murder, she sobbed against him, wanting to claw his chest but unable to move my pinned arms. "Monster, murderer. I didn't know," he gasped. "I didn't know." People start shouting. The emperor has gone to the village, which is what they say when people die. He will not be back soon. Long live his imperial majesty, Ekundayo, king of Oluwan and Oba of Aratsar. Dio is now king because his dad is dead. Both older generations of Raybearers are now gone. Also in the fray, both Wooin and Tarisai get hit by the arrows because the warriors are shooting at them because the emperor was just guilt. Wooin takes them to Songlan. He flies them there with his special wind power. They get to the Songland border. Ye-un is there, which, if you remember much earlier in the book, she was able to free herself from the underworld and come back for this story. And she's taking care of other children that are redemptors. A lot of parents will abandon their children when they come out with tattoos like that because they don't want to have the pain further down the line when they have to be sacrificed to the underworld, basically. And she updates Tarisai, like she is trying to train the redemptors that have been abandoned to come out of the underworld, help them to survive, hopefully like how she did. Ye-un takes care of her wounds, and Woo-in takes her to the mountain that makes up Songland's border, and they go into the heart of it because there's something in there that the lady viewed once and told her what she needed to know, and it needs to be a Raybearer who goes in there. When they get in there, she finds a memory of the storyteller, confined to rock for when I'm needed. This tells her the true story of Artsar and the Raybearers. We learn of a brother and sister, Wurola and Inoba. Inoba was brave, Wurola was wise. She saw how division weakened humans against the Ibiku, and when she told Inoba he enslaved an Alagbato, demanding the power to unite 12 realms. This all happened several thousand moons ago. That's when Tarisai realizes this is how the lady learned how to enslave Melu. For Inoba's first wish, he wanted the Alagbato to grow land across the oceans. And so Inoba crossed his new continent with a formidable army. But land so vast could not be conquered by Inoba's spear alone, and so Warola used her words to win the hearts and minds of the people. Still, they were unsure of victory against the Ibiku. That's when Inoba asked for his second wish, the power to rule an empire for eternity. The Eru, the enslaved Alagbato, climbed to the heavens and stole 2 rays from the sun, and states, no man escapes old age, but for every heart moved by your ray, one facet of death's blade may not touch you. Your heirs shall be even more powerful, for they shall possess one immunity at birth. Take this ray and give the other to your sister and equal, for no being was made to rule alone. But Inoba, seeing the nations his spear had won, said, I have no equal, and devoured both rays himself. Inoba's rule was long and soon peaceful. His ray caused him to outlive Wurola, and though he mourned her, his pride scrubbed her from the story of the earth. Under the treaty that Inoba made, monsters from the underworld disappeared from the continent. Redemptor children were born in every realm. But after years of parents wailing in the streets, weeping as their children were taken from them, the Ard began to resent their emperor. Why should we sacrifice our children for peace, when the emperor need not sacrifice his own? Because Inobu had made the Obiku promise that Olawani children would never be born as redemptors. Remember, that's the area that Inoba is from, and like that's where the main palace is. So Inoba goes back to the Eru to ask how he can make it so the redemptors only come from Songland. That is how the third wish, I guess, is made, and he gives him a new power so that Inoba can anoint a council of 11, what we see today in this book, and explains a treaty that was sealed by blood with 1 drop from every ruler. That's why currently the council has 1 representative from every area of Artsar, except for Songland, because they didn't join the treaty, which is probably why Inoba was asking about, like, how do I make it only those people? And the arrow explains that as long as the blood was equal, no realm drew their short straw, and so all sacrificed equally. But now that Inoba had united 11 souls to his blood held the power of 12 realms. So when they gathered to renew the treaty, Inoba's blood would supplement the power of the other 12 realms. The more blood of yours that's in there, the less likely that you will be drawn. So Songland has the least blood because they're not on the Raybearers Council. After that, no redemptors were born in Artsar, only in Songland. And since Inoba was the only one who knew about this, nobody could really do anything to stop it. And every time they renewed the treaty, which they're going to do at the end of this book, Inoba's descendants would have their blood holding the power of 12 realms added to the treaty, which would further stack the odds against Songland. So now Tarisai knows all of this, and she's like, I gotta stop it. She sees a vision of Dio spilling his blood, which has the blood of 12 realms, not including Songland. So when she comes to, she tells Woo-in what she learned, says that the Songlanders are cursed, but she thinks her mother would have fixed it because she had anointed Woo-in, who is a Songlander, so she would have Songland blood in her as well. But Woo-in reveals that he was actually never meant to be anointed. And we get a flashback to when he was anointed. He basically came back from the underworld, went back to the queen, his parents, and she was upset because nobody wants their child after they've seen what they've seen in the underworld, I guess. So he runs away. Woo-in meets the lady. He takes her to the same cave that Tarisai was just taken to. She learns all this stuff. He is upset because he's still a child. He's still 10. And Woo-in wants to be anointed by her. She's like, no, I can't. You don't want to be anointed. I can make you an honorary council member. He's like, that's not good enough. I won't have the ray. So in the end, a child way too easily convinces her to let him be anointed. And she says out loud, Isaacin blood would balance it, several streams from different realms. It's a risk, but it could work. There's still room on my council. I need only find the right one. Isaacin, turns out, are mixed people. So she was filling her council with people who are mixed from different realms in Artsar so that she could get kind of more of their blood to hopefully cancel out the full Songlander blood that she got from Woo-in. And they realized that that's why the lady also was missing her 12th member, because she was trying to find the perfect person who was like the perfect mix. Tarisai says it's so callous, like choosing breeds at a market. And wouldn't Isaacin blood be weaker? A pure blood council member represents a realm fully, whereas an Isaacin represents each realm by half. Or their blood represents each realm fully. No one knows for sure how the magic of Inoba's shield works. So she was gambling. Really gambling. I don't know how she let this 10-year-old convince her. Tarisai has a moment and she awakens and realizes she has to do something. She borrows Woo-in's familiar cat. Every Redemptor who comes out finds like a beast that helps them through the underworld. And she resolves to go back to Ileoba and stop the treaty from happening or do something. It's gonna happen the next day, so she has to get back fast. So she decides to just take as many lodestones as possible, which is very harmful. So by the time she makes it to the gates of Ileoba, she is like fading. So is Hyung, the beast, and nobody can even tell what she is, and she's like about to pass out. She passes out. She thinks she's gonna wake up in the underworld. She sees Melu and is able to talk to him, and he's like, you're not in the underworld. Melu has appeared to her in Olawan now that the lady is dead. He's free to continue to roam, and he saves her, and all the guards that were chasing her are bowed down because this is an Alagbato who's like a revered figure for them. She's like, how am I not dead? The Alagbato says, you found a purpose. Wanting to be loved was not enough. Devotion to your friends was not enough, but wanting justice to carve out a new story for this world, no matter the cost, that was enough. No human's wish may rule you now. And he sends her to go try and stop the treaty, figure something out. She runs, bursts in, tries to stop the ritual. She very briefly says what she knows and basically says the Kunleas cursed the Songlanders. The Songlanders are there because all the leaders of the different realms on the continent that Artsar's on are there. And Queen High Son of Songland and her daughter, Woo-in's sister, are there, upset obviously, and they're like, we knew the Kunleas cursed us. We knew that Songland wasn't cursed by the storyteller, you know, their god. So that's good news, you know? Tarisai's like, Dio didn't know, nobody knew, only Inoba knew, and the secret died with him. The Songland leaders are like, why should we believe you? Fair. The Songlanders are like, we'll withdraw from the treaty completely. Dio does not want that because it means Ibiku can come from the underworld to like just attack people as they will, start a war with the people on the continent. Not what he wants. He's just throwing things at the wall. He's like, oh, like, okay, to make up for this, the next generation of Redemptors will come from Artsar. Tarisai does something unprecedented and offers herself and says, you can have the soul of a Raybearer. I offer the soul of an Empress. She shows Ayataro's mask and states, I am Tarisai Kunleo, niece of the late Emperor. The priests of Am may examine my blood. And she says, you know what I am, spirits. Do you accept my offer? And they say, no, your blood is too weak. You don't have any council members. Your ray is too weak, so you're not a good enough prize. And ultimately, they're like, you have to form a council with all the 12 leaders of Artsar. And they give her 2 years to do that. And they give her Redemptor tattoos as a mark of her promise. She has a final meeting with the council, Dio's council now. And then she ends up with a longer conversation with Sanjeet, who obviously they've been having a romance this whole time. He says, I will lean on you, Empress, if you promise you'll come back. The underworld is not accustomed to losing souls. It will tempt you to stay. You will want to pay for the sins of your ancestors, even after you fulfill the treaty. I can't keep you safe. I won't bottle up who you are, not even for your own good, but I'm scared, Tar. I need you to promise you'll come back. And she does. And it's really beautiful. They kiss. It's nice. She goes to sleep that night, obviously worrying about what she has to do. She has to convince 12 rulers of Artsar. There's a reason that they normally do the council as children. It's much easier for children to love because she has to convince these rulers to love her. Like, that's what it means to be on a Raybearer's council. And she wakes up because of all this stress, and Kathleen comes to her hidden as a guard and says that Tarisai needs to bring the Lady Shade back to talk to her, to say goodbye. All of the former council members tried to bring her back, but they feel it's clear that she's waiting for Tarisai. So she sets a page from the lady's journal on fire. The lady appears. The lady tells Tarisai what her death was like and how Tarisai's friends cared for her in her last moments, which is really heartbreaking. She said, "The Kunleo boy ordered the healers to give me an antidote. It was too late, of course, and I did not anticipate that Ekundai would try to save me. I tried to kill him. He ordered healers to my bedside simply because he knew that you would mourn me." She said, "Olugbade was not so noble, but sometimes I have learned the fruit is unlike the tree." Obviously referring to Dio and Tarisai. Tarisai asked her about the underworld. The lady says, "Yes, the stories are true. To reach my eternal rest, I will join the parade of all dead souls, and for every step I take, I will feel any pain that I caused out of malice or neglect while I live. But I was able to wait. I wanted to see you first." And Tarisai is immediately defensive. "Why? Because you still want me to overthrow Dio? Because you want me to betray Songlan to the Abiku like you were planning to?" And then the lady flinched. And the lady says, "You are my daughter. I wanted to say goodbye." The lady expresses kind of a regret and says, "It was a game, you know. I played it the only way I knew how. Artsar would not have crowned me without an army, and so I made promises to gain Songland's support. But if I had let the Abiku take art children instead of Songlanders, even an army would not have saved me. Wuin doesn't understand." She comes up with some ideas also, and she says, like, "That boy must be suffering all alone. I will send Kathleen to nurse him. I crossed realms to form my council, saved outcasts, prodigies that the world ignored. I gave them communities. I made them useful. There are so many still out there. Genius is waiting to be seen and recognized. My council can continue my work. You will be confined to this lofty palace, but my people will be on the streets below, helping you rule from within. My enemies think I have lost, but they are wrong. I said I would put an empress on the throne of Artsar, and I have. Through you, my legacy lives." And Tarisai's thinking, "You didn't make me empress. You didn't make me who I am. I'm not the sequel of your story. You did not give me my name." Tarisai keeps that inside and just kisses her mother on the cheek, gives her a nice image with her halo of the lady holding her when she was a baby. And she says, "Goodbye, mother." The lady says, "Goodbye, maid of me." And then before she leaves for good, says, "Tarisai, Tarisai Idajo." And that is the end of the book. Hopefully you enjoyed this recap. I know it was very long. Let me know if you've read this book. Let me know if you are excited to read Redemptor, if you've already read it. Leave me a sun emoji in the comments down below if you have made it this far into the video. Congrats to you. YouTube thinks you'll like this video, and I will see you in my next one. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.